Good afternoon and welcome to Putney for Boat Race Sunday, and welcome to our coverage of this year's reserve races. I'm Fergus, Mainland, and I'm joined by two former presidents of Oxford University and Cambridge. In the dark blues it is Ella Stadler, last year's president, and Freddie Davidson, who has also won 2 boat races himself as well. Thank you very much for joining me to look ahead to the reserve races this year. And Ella, let's start with the women's races. It's a fascinating fixture this year, particularly post-Olympics, and with Alan French in his second year. What are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how Osiris and Blondie plays out today. I think it's really exciting to see the depth of the squad and how that's translated, especially in a post-Olympic year. So we have lots of athletes who have previously competed in blue boat races who are now competing in this reserve race. And I think under Alan's leadership, we've really seen on the Oxford side like this whole squad mentality. So it's cool to see the impact they'll have on the Osiris race this year and how they'll translate their win from last year into hopefully another.
And how important is that win from last year to help build some momentum into racing this year?
Yeah, really important. I think there's a lot to be said about winning crews and the mentality that can build. And I think Osiris this year, from the conversations I've had with the athletes, they really have a lot of confidence from last year's win and a belief in Alan's programme and what he can achieve.
And Freddie, for Cambridge, obviously lost last year, but the Blondie crew have been so dominant in recent years. How do you capitalise on some of those experiences and not be impacted too much from a loss last year?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult actually. I think, after a few wins it gives you a lot of momentum, but if you're winning year on year, it's actually really difficult to keep winning and keep that hunger and keep that desire. So I think, every so often a loss it can be a good thing, and it can galvanise a lot of change. So I'm really looking forward to see how the Goldie guys bounce back. And I think for Blondie it's about not getting complacent and carrying on the good work and carrying on with the programme, trusting what Paddy's doing and seeing if they can come out with another win.
And talk to me a little bit about that Goldie crew. There's a lot of guys in there who have been in the blue boats in previous years. How important is that experience to have lower down the squad as well?
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the depth of this Cambridge squad. You've got guys who've been in the blue boat. You've also got guys who are new into the squad and have been challenging for the blue boat all year. So I'm really excited to see that Goldie crew, because I think it's probably one of the strongest, standards of racing we're going to see in the reserve race for a long time.
And Ella, talk to me a little bit about the conditions today. We're out filming outside. The sun is out. It's a little bit windy. What are you going to expect from the course and from the tideway as we get further down the course?
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful sunny day here in Putney. For a spectator, it's absolutely perfect. I think for a rower, when you're coming out of the boat houses here, it looks perfect for now, but I think further down the course it's a bit windy, it's a bit gusty, so we might see some choppy water.
And we've just had the crews have been out boating, the reserve crews are on the water, the blue boats are on the water as well. What's it like being up here as a former president, particularly having raced last year?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never been down in Putney for a boat race to be a spectator, so it's really exciting. I'm definitely feeling the nerves still, especially when I clapped them out, kind of put them on the water, but excited to see it.
And Freddie, just finally, we've got the men's reserve race, the women's reserve race. What's your prediction for those 2 races coming up?
I'm always going to back Cambridge, I'm afraid. I'm going to back them to the hilt, so yeah, I'm predicting 2 Cambridge wins.
Ella?
2 Oxford wins, obviously.
Very good. So we've got a nice impartial commentary team. Next up is our coverage of the 2025 reserve races between Oxford University and Cambridge University.
Well, we've hot-footed it to our commentary position and we are ready for the first of our reserve races to get underway, and that will be the women's race between Osiris for Oxford University and Blondie for Cambridge University. Ella and Freddie are alongside me, looking forward to describing all of the action over the next few minutes, but we are probably about 5 or 6 minutes away from the crews getting ready and attached onto the state boats. So let's take this opportunity now to run you through the crews for this year's reserve race between Osiris and Blondie. In dark blue, racing for Oxford University, they are coxed by Joe Gellett. In the stroke seat it is Sierra Sparks, backed up by Hattie Cooper at 7. Catherine King sits at 6. She is one of their co-captains in this boat, with Imogen Boxall at 5. Millie Tripe sat at 4. Hermione War at 3. Tara Salaba at 2, with Amelia Mills in the bow seat. For Blondie, the light blues for Cambridge University, Louis Deneve in the coxing seat, and sat in front of him will be Caroline Ritsky. At 7, Eloise Etherington. Karina Graf, their captain, at 6. Polly Shorrock sits at 5. Jessica Spain sits at 4. Becky Ashford will be in the 3 seat. Mia Frysham at 2, and in the bow seat for the light blues for Blondie, it is Ellie Solar. So we can see there our crews are now getting attached onto the state boats. Nervous moments now. And Ella, let's come to you first of all, of course. Last year's president in the blue boat. Talk me through what these athletes are feeling at the moment.
Yeah, this moment will be very nerve-wracking for them for sure, but they'll also practice their thoughts and how they'll be feeling in this moment through various fixtures in the lead up to today. So I think between both boats they will have just handed all of their kit back to the stake boats. They'll be having their last sip of water and they'll be really tuning into the cocks ready to go. So looks like the stake boats haven't quite pushed them round to the front, ready to start the race. So they might still be passing the last bits of kit back between the crews there.
Well, let's just take you through some of the results in recent years in this fixture between Osiris and Blondie. Last year it was Osiris who came out on top. 5-length victors for the Dark Blues over Blondie. That's a result they'll be looking to repeat this year. However, between 2016 and 2023, Blondie went for 7 wins in a row. But dynasties follow this race wherever it seems to go. Osiris won 4 in a row between 2012 and 2015, so perhaps last year's race was a catalyst to set things off for the Dark Blues. Well, Freddie Davidson will be hoping that's not the case. What can we expect from Cambridge, and what are you expecting to see perhaps in the early stages of this race?
Well, I think especially with Cambridge on the Middlesex station, they're going to be trying to get out the blocks fast and take advantage of that first bend. So the bend goes round Fulham Football Club to Cambridge's advantage. They'll be trying to get out the blocks nice and fast and settle onto a good rhythm by that point to take advantage.
Cambridge, of course, coached by Matilda Horn. She joined this light blue setup back in June 2023. The previous coxing experience with Great Britain, she was the cox the women's 8 at the Tokyo Olympic Games. But for Osiris, for the Dark Blues, it is Zoe Taylor. It's her OUBC, previously at Oxford Brookes, and previously at Reading Bluecoat School, same as Alan French, Ella.
Yeah, exactly. So Zoe's joined the coaching team this year, and I've been down to a few sessions with them, and they're feeling really good coming into this race, really confident. I think it's been a really great coaching team, and it looks like potentially we might be nearly off to the start of this race.
So just before we start this race, we can see both the coxes, their hands up. That's Louis Deneuve for Cambridge, and on the left hand side of your screen, Joe Gellett. We have the coin toss results. Cambridge called, they lost the coin toss, and Oxford ended up picking the Surrey station. Freddie, just very quickly, as an athlete, do the coin toss results mean anything to you?
I always went into the coin toss with a plan that any station's a good station, because you just don't know what's going to happen. So I think deep down you probably will know where you want to be, but you just take whatever you're given.
Yeah, definitely, totally agree. I think the fastest boat wins regardless of station. I think almost people outside of boat race athletes like to read a lot more into Surrey station, Middlesex station, all of that, but I think as an athlete you just know that you got to perform on each one, doesn't matter which one you're on.
Well, there you go, you heard it from both of our former presidents there just now. The hand still up from the coxes, the experienced hand of Joe Gellett. He steered Osiris back in 2021, and he's previously steered the blue boat in 22 and 24. Louis Deneuve on the other side of things, he is the tallest cox the boat race has ever had. He's also the tallest member of this crew, by over 10 centimetres. Joe Gellett, though, he knows this position well, as we've said previously. Cox the blue boat, cox Osiris. A very safe pair of hands for this Oxford crew as they are looking to go back-to-back wins for the first time in a while in this Osiris Blondie race. And of course, Ella, you're in the wonderful position that Joe was your cox last year. What are you expecting him to bring to this race?
Joe is a fantastic athlete. I have so much confidence on him going into this race and his ability to handle a crew, handle various situations. He's also coxed an Osiris race before, so knows the feeling of being in this exact seat. He's probably one of the most experienced coxes racing in this right now.
And there we see the red flag is dropped. We are underway in the 2025 edition of the Osiris Blondie race. The reserve races between Oxford and Cambridge Universities. Fast, furious starts from both of these crews as they're out of the blocks in the early stages of this race. Cambridge University on the left hand side of your screen, they're racing on Middlesex. Oxford University in the dark blue, they're racing on Surrey, and it's a powerful start. It's an aggressive start from both of these crews, but at the moment, Freddie, it's perhaps the light blues of Cambridge University, the Blondie crew, who have got the early race, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think off the blocks there, it's difficult water because they're in the wash from the women's blue boat race, but I think both crews look really clean and punchy out the blocks. For me, I think it's about who gets to length quickest at that high rate of striking, and it does look like Cambridge are doing a slightly better job of that in the Blondie crew at the moment, and you can see they're eking out a little advantage coming past the Fulham wall.
Cambridge University goal, that Blondie crew just stretching out to the early lead, as Freddie says. Oxford University, they're hanging on in there. This, of course, they picked this station, they picked the Surrey station, but it will be Cambridge University, it will be the light blues who have the early advantage as we head towards round Fulham. But Ella, I think one thing that's worth noting, obviously this reserve race follows up the women's race about 10 or 15 minutes ago, but we had an early pause and a restart just at the end of or just before we got to Fulham Football Club. All the wash from all of the boats will have a huge impact on these crews, won't it?
For sure. I think that will really impact this race, that delay to the women's blue boat race. But I think both crews have had a lot of prep on rough water. I know Oxford specifically in their fixture against Leander really had some tough water. I think it was a lot worse for the reserve crews, and it looks now like Osiris are handling that very well and have stretched out a lead over Blondie.
Well, we can see now our crew is just starting to settle down into their race rhythm. You know, this isn't a 2k race, this isn't going to be over in 6 or 7 minutes. These crews are going on for 6.8 kilometres from Putney all the way to Mortlake. It's a long race, it's very much a marathon, not a sprint that they've got to get through, and it's so important that they're able to establish their mid-race pace and continue to lengthen out. But we've got warnings from the umpires. The flag is already out in the early stages of this race. You know, both of these coxes, Louis Deneuve for Cambridge, Joe Gellert for Oxford, they're both going to be fighting over the fastest stretch of water right the way down this course. And Joe's experience, Ella, is going to be so important, particularly if these crews are neck and neck in the early stages.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think it's unsurprising that we're seeing some warnings here. A Middlesex crew is very likely to try and push the Surrey crew as far over to the left side of our screen when they're coming around the Middlesex bend, and try and push them out of the fast water here.
And Freddie, we can see there, Cambridge University, it's the Blondie crew at the moment. They've got the lead, they've got the advantage, perhaps not to be expected given the station that they're on. They're on that Middlesex station and very much capitalising on that early advantage that they got.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we saw them coming into that bend, to me it looked like that Blondie crew had to cool down the boat and really put the afterburners on. They've got onto their base race pace, so they're at a lower rate of striking, but you can see they're really sending it every stroke. They know they want to get as much as they can out of this bend as possible, and at the moment they've got a few seats out of Oxford, but they're going to be looking for more.
Certainly. Well, their president, or their captain of this boat, the Blondie crew, sat there in 6th. Karina Graf, so much experience she brings to this crew. What an absolute asset to have in the middle of the boat. You know, she's raced Blondie in 2022. In the last couple of years, she's been up in the blue boat. So what an asset. A huge amount of experience Karina Graf brings in, and she'll be commanding her troops down this course. But that bend advantage, Ella, starting to run out. That Cambridge had in the early stages of this race, and Oxford University have done so well to hang on, haven't they?
100%. This is a really crucial part of the race. I think really important to understand that the boat race is a very front-loaded race, and getting out and taking those leads are always really important. And soon the advantage will turn to Oxford, as you can see in the bottom right-hand side of our screen. We're about to come round the Surrey bend, and that will be a big advantage to Oxford. So Cambridge have potentially not taken the most out of their advantage here.
Well, it'll be a few minutes' time before we start to really see that Hammersmith bend advantage start to work in the favour of Oxford University. And you know, we talked about some of that experience in the Cambridge crew. Karina Graf there at 6. Well, Oxford have loaded up their stern with talent. Joe Gellert, we've talked about all of his experience learning Cox at Hampton School and his blue boat racing with Oxford. While down the crew in the stroke seat, Sarah Sparks, one of their co-captains in this boat this year. What an asset to have in their stroke seat. And just 2 seats back in the 6th seat, Catherine King, one of the most experienced boat racers that you could possibly have, sitting there in the 6th seat. You know, she's previously raced in the Cambridge University lightweight blue boat. She's done Blondie and part of last year's Osiris winning boat. So the fact that they're down at the moment, they're sitting probably about half a length, 3/4 of a length down to Cambridge University, won't be phasing her, and she'll be feeding that back to her crew at the moment. As we've said though, Cambridge University, they continue to lead. But Freddie, talk me through what's important for Cambridge to do now, because in a couple of minutes' time they've got a lot of work to do to match Oxford around that Hammersmith bend.
Yeah, I think this is the point where the boat race really turns into a mental race, to be honest. I think, you know, round the outside of the bend, it's possible to move on crews. If you're on the outside, it's possible to break away even, but it's mentally super tough to keep on your rhythm and trust that you're going to be able to do that. So right now, the Cambridge rowers are going to be trying to push those thoughts out of their head that they're going to be going around the outside of the bend, and they're trying to just send it as hard as they can on their rhythm and trust their process and trust, you know, the 8 girls and their cocks, that rhythm is going to take them around the outside of the bend and hang on around the outside. So yeah, for me, I think this is now like a mental battle. Can they keep their composure around the outside of the bend and keep that lead?
It's punchy, it's aggressive, it's really racy from the dark blues, from this Osiris crew, and they're hanging on in there against Cambridge University. They haven't moved in the past minute, 2 minutes or so, and I think, Ella, for Oxford, that's such a powerful thing to be doing at the moment, particularly when you know that in 30 seconds time what a bend advantage they're going to have.
100%. Joe will really be communicating that down the crew, talking to them about that, how they've been able to hold Cambridge, they've held them around the Cambridge advantage, and their bend is coming. The advantage is coming to them.
Certainly. Well, Hammersmith Bridge is the next big mark. You know, they've gone past the Harry's Depository. You can see the crowds on the far side of the bank at the moment. They'll be roaring these two crews on as they come towards that famous, that historic bridge that means so much in this boat race. And you know, history and tradition dictates that if you're leading at Hammersmith Bridge, so often you will go on and win this boat race. But for Oxford University, they are right where they want to be as that bend is about to spin round in their advantage. Cambridge University got out well. They held off Oxford in the early stages of this race, but as Freddie said, the middle of this boat race is the most important part, and it's where it's won or lost, particularly in the heads. So here we go then, underneath Hammersmith Bridge. It is the bows of Blondie, it's the light blues who are underneath first. Matilda Horn, their coach, watching on. She'll be delighted with the early stages of this race. But Oxford now, we're expecting them really to roar in this second half of the race, really come to life now with that bend advantage. And I'm sure the calls will be coming from Joe Gellett, it will be coming from Catherine King, from Sierra Sparks, all the way down the boat, and we'll be looking to see how Oxford capitalise in the next 3 or 4 minutes.
And I think around the outside of this bend on the Hammersmith Bridge, you can really see the two styles of the different clubs start to come in. For me, it looks like, I think particularly Caroline, the stroke seat at the Cambridge boat, is delivering a load of length around the front and really setting up a nice long stroke. I think Oxford rowing maybe a slightly shorter arc, but a bit more of a punchy rhythm. And for me, on the inside of the bend, that's really helping them to get back on terms with Cambridge slightly.
As we said, Cambridge, as I say, are coxed by Louis Deneuve, Caroline Radziski in their stroke seat. You know, previous experience at Durham University, and she's backed up by Eloise Etherington. What's fascinating though, her opposite number, Hattie Cooper, is the tallest member of the dark blue crew, but Eloise is the shortest of the light blue. But the length and rhythm that she's able to create in that 7th seat and pass down to the rest of the boat is outstanding. She's creating a really good rhythm for that rest of the boat, and they're looking so smooth at the moment, that Cambridge crew. But Oxford University, they still aren't going away, Ella Arley. They're hanging on in there, but if they're going to move, they're going to start to move up that Cambridge boat, it has to be now, doesn't it?
Yeah, they need to start making their move now for sure. I think there's definite drive in that boat. It looks like they're potentially taking a step on now, maybe going for a bit of a move around the outside of the bend, monopolising on that momentum.
Oxford University, you know, they've got this long bend advantage. The next thing they'll be getting to, they'll be coming past St Paul's School, they'll be coming towards Chiswick Heights and Chiswick Pier as well. But Cambridge University at this point look to be responding to that advantage that Oxford University have. You know, Oxford, we would have hoped from their perspective that they might have stepped on, they might have been able to eke into the advantage that Cambridge have, but it's not happening at the moment, is it, Freddie?
No, and I think you saw there Cambridge really stepped on and took a few seats around that second part of the Surrey bend. There's a little bit more bend to come, and then we're going to hit the Ayot, which is a straight shot into Barnes. But you can see around the second part of this Surrey bend, Cambridge are really stepping on and it's now the mental game shifts onto Oxford. The pressure's on them. Can they keep their heads and push back into Cambridge, knowing that they might have to then go around the outside of the final bend?
And we can see as well, conditions starting to get a little bit bumpy. We talked about the weather beforehand, didn't we, Ella? We're expecting a bit of a headwind down this middle section of the race, particularly coming past Chiswick. It's exactly what we've got. How are you envisaging that might affect the next 2-3 minutes of racing?
Yeah, this is where they're really going to get tough for the crews. Joe will be communicating to them just to really focus on their blade work, get the blade in and press once the blade is in the water. I think if I was in Oxford position here, I'd be feeling quite confident about the experience that they gained in their fixture against Leander. I think some of the athletes after the fixture described it as very biblical conditions with water crashing over their heads. So they've been in this position before, they know what this is going to feel like, and I think they'll be feeling prepared.
Certainly. Well, we are just coming past Chiswick. We can see it in the background there. The crews are coming past. It is still Cambridge University. It is still this Blondie crew who are looking for revenge this year. It was, of course, Osiris who won last year. 5 lengths Osiris won this race, but Cambridge University are right where they want to be to flip that result and get themselves back to winning ways. We were wondering, we're looking to see what Oxford might be able to do in the middle stages of this race, but Cambridge University, that lead they had as they came underneath Hammersmith Bridge, it's almost as if that has grown, and I think at this stage we might have clear water between these two crews. And Ella, I think at this stage in the race, Oxford have to dig in and they have to buy into all of the training that they've been doing over the past few months to ensure that they can keep themselves in contention.
Yeah, I agree. At this point, Oxford really need to make a move and hold on to their position on the water. I think if Cambridge were to gain any more metres in front, they can then take the last bit of the advantage for the Surrey bend, and that's not what Oxford need at this time.
No, certainly not. But for Cambridge University, what a position to be in. For Ellie Salar, sat there in the bow seat. She learned to row at Bedford Modern School. This is her first year at Cambridge University, and what a seat to be in. Out in front, currently leading the reserve races, looking back not just on the rest of her crew, but her opposition, the Dark Blues from Oxford University. It's a wonderful position for them. It's a wonderful position as well for Mia Frysham, who sat at 2 just in front of her. The two of them will be delighted with this, relaying all this information onto the rest of the crew. But Oxford University, they're still not going away. They're hanging on in there, whilst Cambridge are perhaps growing their advantage. There's a little bit more water between those two crews. It's not massive. Cambridge University haven't quite been able to shut the door on Oxford. This race is no means done. We're passing our next big marker on the course. It's Chiswick Pier. And I think what's fascinating at this point, Freddie, both of these crews are now starting to drift over to the other side of the river. We depending on where the stream is on the course, but both of them perhaps moving out of the rough water towards something that's slightly more sheltered.
Yeah, I think on our pictures you can't quite appreciate how difficult that water was down the Aya. I think when you're in the boat, it almost feels like the whole thing's moving up and down underneath you, and it's really difficult to keep your rhythm through that. So I was really impressed by both crews there, staying really clean down the Aya and keeping their rhythm. I think as we can see, Cambridge has just been able to then slot back into their kind of base pace rhythm a little bit better than Oxford, and you can see the heads are up in the Cambridge boat now. The pain starts to recede slightly as you move away from your opposition, and that's what's beautiful about a rowing race, is you can see the opposition behind you when you're ahead. So it's now a case of, can Oxford find anything to come back on Cambridge here, or are Cambridge just going to row away into the sunset here?
Well, Cambridge will be hoping that they will be able to do just that. We talked about righting the wrongs from last year from their point of view, from their perspective, and there's people on board wanting redemption, wanting revenge from last year's result. We've talked about some of the athletes on board, but particularly Jessica Spain, Beanie as she's known to the rest of her club mates and her teammates, part of that losing crew last year. She was sat at 6 in Eeyore in trial 8s, and here she is sat at 4 right in this engine room of the light blue boat, the Blondie crew for Cambridge University, really driving them on. And next up in the background we can see it's just the shadows of Barnes Bridge starting to loom. It will be Cambridge University as things stand who will be shooting the middle arches of Barnes Bridge, first of all ahead of Oxford University. So we're very much coming into the final stages now of this reserve race between Osiris and Blondie. Cambridge University have stepped on so well, and Ella, we talked about the positions that the two crews were in at Hammersmith. We talked about the bend advantage that this Osiris crew have, but that's an incredible bit of rowing that we've seen from Cambridge to kick on, right, particularly around the outside of the bend, isn't it?
Yeah, very impressed by that, the ability to kind of hold your your mental strength on the outside of a bend and really kind of be fighting against the odds there to come around the outside of Crewe. So very impressive from Cambridge in that position.
Yeah, certainly. Well, Oxford University, they've still got work to do. They've got a couple of lengths now to make up if they're going to get themselves back into contention. But we're coming up to 15 minutes into this race, very much in the final stages of it. Cambridge University, it's been a tremendous row from this Blondie crew. As we said beforehand, this race comes in dynasties of success for both programmes. As we said, 7 in a row for Blondie between 2016 and 2023 before it was interrupted by the Osiris, the Dark Blues, last year. But they themselves so dominant between 2012 and 2015, winning 4 in a row. And that's something they're wanting to replicate, wanting to make sure that last year's Osiris victory, I should say, wasn't just a flash in the pan, and particularly under new stewardship. You know, as we said, Zoe Taylor in her first year, Alan French in his second year leading this programme, making sure that they can build on that success and start to win a few more of these races in future years. But this Osiris crew, as we've said, they will be the second crew heading underneath Barnes Bridge. In the bow suit, we've mentioned Ella Solar, Mia Frysham sitting at 2, Becky Ashford at 3, Beanie Spain at 4, Polly Shorrock at 5, Karina Graf at 6, Eloise Etherington at 7, Caroline Radziski at stroke, and Louis Deneve coxing this Cambridge crew. Osiris, though, a reminder of that lineup.
And as you can see, coming through Barnes Bridge, the water's really kicked off.
We will return to that women's race because we are now underway with the ISIS Goldie race. ISIS racing for Oxford University, Goldie for Cambridge University. This is the men's reserve race. We'll pick up the end of the women's race, but Freddie, just very quickly, a tremendous start for this Goldie crew in the men's reserve race.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really excited to see this Goldie crew because I think it's one of the strongest for a few years. They've got returning guys who've rode in the blue boat in the men's boat race, and they've got some really talented guys who've come into the squad this year and not quite made the blue boat. So it's a really strong crew, and you can see that now straight out of the blocks. They've taken an early lead, looking really clean.
So we will pick up that race in a few minutes' time once the women's reserve race has finished. But we talked about the choppy conditions down past Chiswick 8, past St Paul's School. Ella, we've got it again here up to the finish line, don't we? But Cambridge are just continuing to ride this wave of success that they've had from start to finish. Yeah,
this is looking like some really choppy water that both crews are coming across here as they're approaching the finish line, this last bend of the championship course.
There's Cambridge University out in front, continuing to stretch that margin. Oxford University just drifting slightly in towards the Surrey side, just seeking a little bit of shelter from these rough waters. Perhaps the cameras aren't quite doing it justice at the moment, but it's rough out there, challenging conditions, and both of these two crews doing particularly well to ride these waves, but Cambridge University doing better of the two. And Freddie, I think at this point, for Cambridge to be able to bounce back from last year's defeat, for Blondie to be able to notch up another win in this record, it's testament, isn't it, to all of the hard work and to all of the coaches who have been at Cambridge to help build this successful programme.
Yeah, I mean, I think the women's programme at Cambridge has been an amazing success for a number of years. I think they'll have come back from last year with a lot more fighting spirit, and you can see that here. Like, I think for them today on Middlesex Station, that was a huge mental battle to stay calm around the outside of the Surrey Bend, and you can see as soon as they got in front, to me it looked like they loosened off, they found some confidence. We spoke to their coach Matilda Hall, and she said that she wanted to see them do what they do day in, day out. She didn't want anything special, but she wanted them to perform like they do in their training pieces, and I think we're seeing that now. We're seeing a really strong rhythm that's carrying them all the way through to the line.
Certainly, well, they've been strong in their trialates, they've been strong in their fixtures, racing domestically, and here they are, this Blondie crew, back to success. It is redemption for the Light Blues in this reserve race. They've just got a few strokes to go left in the 2025 edition of the Blondie Osiris reserve race, but it will be Cambridge University once again. It was Oxford last year, but it is redemption. It is back to winning ways for the lightweights, back to winning ways for Blondie. Victory this year in the women's reserve race for Cambridge University, and huge scenes of elations as they start to drift underneath Chiswick Bridge. We are though back with the men's race. We're back with the men's reserve race between ISIS for Oxford University, the Dark Blues, and Goldie for Cambridge. At the moment we can see it is that Goldie crew that is packed full of talent, that is out in front leading, but only just in the early stages of this race. Let's take you through the Goldie lineup. They're coxed by James Trotman. In the stroke seat it is Matt Edge, who stroked last year's Blue Boat to victory. At 7 it is Joe Travis. Simon Nanayan at 6. Tom Mackey, the Australian, at 5. Connor Attridge sits at 4. The Canadian Thomas Marsh at 3. Brett Taylor at 2. And in the bow seat it is Matt Morgan, hoping he will be the first man over the line in this reserve race. For the Dark Blues, for ISIS, the experienced Tara Slade in the coxing seat. Tom Rigney will stroke this boat. Saxon Stacey will sit at 7. Gabe Reynolds at 6. Luke Robinson in the engine room in the 5 seat, with Yannick Limmer, the German, at 4. Paolo Cikuta sits at 3, with the Brit-Australian Isaac Throsby at 2, and Felix Crabtree in the bow seat. So that's your lineup. These two crews about a third of the way through this race, with the Goldie crew out in front. And Freddie, before we switch back over to the women's reserve race, you were talking about this experience on board. We've got 4 of this crew who were on board with the Blue Boat last year. That talent is phenomenal, isn't it, to be able to have that dripping down into your reserve crew this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having 4 guys who've done the boat race, just having gone through that experience plays huge dividends coming into the race, because this is a race that's so different to any other. So having had that experience, knowing what to expect and not being fazed by it all, gives you a massive advantage to have that in the boat. And I think the boat race is all about building a crew as quickly as you can in 6 months, and often that's from a group of guys who've never rowed together. So just having 4 guys who've been through the program together and know what's going on is really helpful. What I would say though is I think ISIS are looking really good. I think with the new coaching at Oxford in the men's squad, there's a slight change in style to me. They look a little bit longer around the front, and just a slightly longer arc in the water, maybe a little bit softer on the catch, but they've got a really nice sweep through, and I think their stroke man Tom Rigney is doing an awesome job. So I think this race as a whole is a super high standard.
Yeah, that stroke man there, Tom Rigney. He raced for ISIS back in 2023. He's back in for the 2025 edition. That race he lost by just 1 length, and he'll be open to rectify that. They've got a lot of work to do as they come underneath Hammersmith Bridge. This Goldie crew will now be looking to capitalise on the big bend advantage that they've got past St Paul's School and down this Hammersmith bend. But Ella, just briefly on this ISIS crew, as we've said, new coaching staff instructor for this ISIS crew, in particular Bodo Schulenberg coaching them. He's previously worked at Hingsey Sculling School, and there's a nice bit of connection, isn't there, between Gabe Reynolds at 6 in this ISIS crew and Bodo from Hingsey.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a connection there that has existed, and they've been coaching together. They've been working through that previously before now under the Oxford structure, and I think Bodo's been working really well with the Oxford team. I've heard some really good things about how the structure's been working this year, with Harry Brightmore with the lightweights and Mark kind of overseeing the structure, and I think this change has really brought a lot of momentum and kind of confidence to Oxford.
Certainly, this ISIS crew is fascinating. Saxon Stacey sitting just in front of Gabe at 7. He's one of only 2 blues in ISIS. In this ISIS crew. He was ISIS in 2023, he was the Blue Boat last year, and Gabe Reynolds, as just a teenager last year, stroked ISIS. He's now moved back to 6. They're led by Tom Rigney. As we've said, he's previous boat race experience for him. But Freddie, as our crews are sort of heading towards Chiswick and this middle section of the course, our eyes are naturally drawn to the Cambridge crew, who are continuing to move away from Oxford in the middle stages of this race.
I think Cambridge right now are looking pretty imperious. I think they've had the inside of the bend, obviously, and they're starting to move away down the Ayot. I think now we're going to see a bit of challenging conditions down the Ayot, and I think that's the opportunity where Oxford might be able to start to move back in.
Certainly. Well, we saw it in the women's race just a few minutes ago, that conditions starting to get a little bit bumpy towards Chiswick. And Ella, perhaps we'll see something similar where both of the coxes just shift themselves over to the Middlesex station, just to protect themselves a little bit from the chop, but still to keep themselves in the mix amongst the stream and the fast bit of water. Yeah,
definitely. I would actually argue that this is looking choppier than we saw for the women's race. Potentially it's the angles that we have camera. We're seeing a few white caps on the water, the wind really challenging the water and the tide there.
Well, if you want someone in your bow seat for Goldie to manage these conditions, you want Matt Morgan. He learned to row on this course at Latimer Upper. He then went to row at Edinburgh University with James Doran, who's racing for Oxford in their blue boat later on today. But all sitting in front of him, again, you've got Brett Taylor. He's one of 4 blues, as we mentioned, who are in this Goldie crew this year. That just speaks volumes for the talent that Cambridge have got racing in their men's blue boat later on today. But what a brilliant set of bow pairs for Cambridge. Matt Morgan, Brett Taylor, and they'll be looking to guide these crews through the water. Just very briefly though, we can bring you some of the celebration shots from the victorious Cambridge University crew that we saw racing earlier on, mixing in with their lightweights who were so strong in yesterday's racing. But we are back with the men. We're back with Goldie versus Isis. It's the 2 reserve races for the 2025 boat races, and it is Goldie. It is Cambridge University out in front leading this. Their stroke Matt Edge setting up a really dominant rhythm. He of course stroked last year's blue boat to victory, and backing him up is one of the returners to Goldie. It is Joe Travis, Goldie last year, and again he'll be looking to go for his 3rd win in a row in this race. Goldie winning the previous 2 races. And of course 2022, the last time that Isis won this race, just like their men's blue boat as well.
You can really see how tough those conditions are. You can see one of the Oxford oarsmen catching a blade on the wave. Sometimes that just can't be avoided because the waves are so big that you just can't clear them, so you can see a splash coming up from the blade. So that's really a sign that they're in really difficult conditions, and I think being in that Cambridge boat, sitting up, looking down in your opposition, is going to feel so much easier to carve through those waves. But I'm impressed with how Oxford are fighting back here. They're still keeping their composure. I think the rowing generally still looks really good, and they've got that nice rhythm. They're just a few lengths down that Cambridge crew.
And I think, Ella, it's reflected in the stroke rates as well, isn't it? Oxford sitting at 31, Cambridge only 30 and a half. You know, they're not able to get their stroke rates up. Normally we see them up sitting about 35, 36 strokes a minute, and it just speaks volumes, doesn't it, to the challenging conditions out there today.
100%. The cocks in this situation will just be focusing on communicating to the crew about getting their blades in, getting in the water cleanly, and pressing once you're in the water. Do not worry too much about the rate, because it's when it's out of the water, as Freddie was just saying, that it can get caught on the waves.
Well, we're in no danger of records being set in today's reserve races like we had in the lightweights previously. We can see there again some of those stroke siders in that Oxford crew. You know, Isaac Throsby in the 2-seat, Yannick Limmer at 4, Gabe Reynolds at 6. Some of their blades are just clipping the top of the waves ever so slightly in these conditions, and it is blowing an absolute hoolie up towards them. It's a really strong headwind that they're dealing with at the moment. And it is Cambridge riding the waves at the moment. They're the ones who are making the most of it at the moment. And Freddie, you know, you look on, they're stroked by Matt Edge, such experience leading their blue boat to victory last year. But what an asset to have in your stroke seat, and he's just able to set up a rhythm that is translated so well down the boat, and the blade work, despite the headwind, is near perfection, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Goldie crew right now are looking really good. You can see from a distance all the blades kind of covering each other. It looks like one blade going into the water, and that's really impressive in these conditions. I think the other thing to say about Matt Edge is, you know, we all watched on last year as he kind of really struggled to get to the end of the course, and I think that's testament to how difficult it is to pace this course. So I would say is that in these conditions, the race is not over yet. With the conditions like they are, this race is going to be longer. It's going to be even more tough for the athletes. They're already at their max, and so coming through Barnes Bridge, it's a case of who can just hold it together through to the line.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting as well that for this Cambridge boat, you know, we had selection going right up to the line with I think switches coming in, sort of last minute changes into this Goldie crew. But a couple of these guys, you know, they've raced over in the United States. Simon Nanayan at 6, Tom Mackey at 5. You know, the pair of them raced with Harvard in their varsity 8s in years gone by, so they're able to bring that experience of match racing, that dual racing that they so often do in the United States. You know, being at Harvard University, rowing on the Charles, they do a lot of racing in the basin of the Charles, and again, quite often, more often than not, it's choppy conditions, it's nasty water that they'll be racing in that basin. So again, you know, they've coming new into the system for Simon in particular this year, but choppy water, bad conditions, it's nothing new to them that they can bring that experience from racing in the United States. And so often again, that match racing, it's one-on-one. It's not something that a lot of university crews are used to in the UK, and it can be quite a big adjustment for people if they're coming into Oxford and Cambridge. But to have that experience at top level in the United States coming into your Goldie crew is phenomenal to have.
So we can see there's a bit more calm in the water coming up to Barnes Bridge. So we'll see as they come through Barnes Bridge whether that wind hits again, those waves start pummeling the boats as they come towards the finish line.
So it is Goldie, it is the light blues of Cambridge University who are the first boat under Barnes Bridge, well into the last 1500 metres or so of this 2025 edition of the men's reserve races. It is the Cox James Trotman, just the 20-year-old Brit, who is leading this crew nearly to victory at the moment. But he is facing Tara Slade for the third consecutive year in this boat race. You know, a fascinating encounter between these two Coxes. And Tara herself, Ella, she brings a huge amount of experience, 28 years old, but already has so many boat race experiences under her belt, and I'm sure that's been a huge asset to this Oxford crew.
Yeah, definitely. Tara coxed me in the 2023 race when we raced against James. Tara won against James in the Blondie Osiris race last year and is now facing, as you said, for the third time in the men's reserve race. So they both kind of switched programs from the women's side to the men's side, which is interesting to see from both of them actually. But both of them bring a lot of experience.
Certainly. Well, into the final stages then of the ISIS Goldie reserve race for the 2025 boat races, and Cambridge University out in front leading this race, just as they did in the women's reserve race previously. But I think what is fascinating at this stage, again, is the lines. You know, we saw in the women's race the two crews slightly over to the right hand side of your screen, hugging the bank a little bit more. Freddie, James is sitting right there in the middle of the course. I assume that's stream related that he's made that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was in that boat, I'd be wanting him to cover Oxford slightly more. But I think at the moment, Cambridge are far enough up, they're in their rhythm. I think he'll be trying to steer a safe line. He's just going to make sure he gets his crew to the finish line in the best stream he can, and trying to annoy the umpire as little as possible, because he doesn't need to. They're far enough up, they can sit there. So yeah, if I was in his boat, I'd probably want him coming over a little bit more, but I think he's doing a good job.
He certainly is. He's steered his crew very well, nearly to victory at this point in the race. But for Oxford, it looks to be second place for them this year. But just to take you through that lineup one more time, it is their Cox Tara Slade steering this boat, Tom Rigney in the stroke seat, behind him Saxon Stacey, Gabe Reynolds at 6, Luke Robinson in the 5 seat, Yannick Limmer at 5, Paolo Cicuta at 3, Isaac Throsby at 2, and Felix Crabtree in the bow seat. But for Cambridge University, for the lightweights, it looks like it will be 3 victories in a row for this Goldie crew as they come up to the line. It's been a tremendous row from them. They've led from start to finish. Last year they won by 4 lengths. This year it could be by even more. An outstanding row for the light blues, an outstanding row from Goldie for James Trotman, Matt Edge, Joe Travis, Simon Nene, Tom Mackey, Connor Attridge, Thomas Marsh, Brett Taylor and Mark Morgan. They are first over the line. James Trotman out of his seat, nearly falling out the side of the boat there. Hands aloft, the victorious Goldie crew will drift under Chiswick Bridge. And for Oxford University, they are over the line. It is defeat for the 3rd year in a row in this ISIS Goldie race. It is back to the drawing board for them. But for Cambridge, you know, what momentum they're building over this boat race weekend. Cambridge University won both of the lightweight races. They won the spare lightweight races. They won the women's reserve race just a few minutes ago, and they've done it again just now. And Freddie, we're just seeing there on screen, the exhaustion is probably just starting to set in now for these boys. But a really incredible row from probably one of the most experienced Goldie crews we'll ever see.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall this is probably one of the highest standard reserve races we've ever had. And we've talked through the personnel through the race, but that really was an awesome performance from the Goldie guys. I think that was imperious from start to finish. And you can see there how much they've pushed themselves, even though they had a big winning margin. I think that speaks to all the hours they put in the training throughout the year. They want to do as much as they can on race day. Even when the race was fairly sewn up, they're still pushing as hard as they can.
And Ella, just very quickly, a word for Oxford, a word for this ISIS crew. You know, particularly in the early stages, they were very valiant, going toe to toe with Cambridge, weren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think they'll be very happy with the first half of that race. I think they put up a great fight, and I don't think they gave up at all for the rest of the course. I think they faced some very tough conditions and really battled through those.
Well, that was the 2025 editions of the reserve races between Isis and Goldie for the men and for Osiris and Blondie for the women. And on this occasion in 2025 it was Cambridge University, the Light Blues, who were victorious on both occasions. So from myself, Fergus Mainland, Ella Stadler and Freddie Davidson, thank you very much for watching.